All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation community. I am super excited to be back with you today. We have a guest that I think everyone is very excited for us to be chatting with today, and that is author Vanessa Kelly. Vanessa, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today and the community.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here too. So it's just great to be part of this community. I've really been enjoying it.
Oh, I'm so happy to
Yeah.
hear that. And I know everyone is excited for this book that we're going to be talking about today. Because we love more Jane Austen and inspirations of Austen. I was wondering first if we could hear a little bit about you, and you have an extensive background as an author, and tell us kind of what got us to the point of Murder in Highbury, which I love the poster behind you, by the way, because
Yeah.
this is such a pretty cover. It's fun to see that on your wall. So, what got us to this point in your writing history?
Well, it was a bit of a circuitous route. I spent many years in grad school, both my bachelor's and, well, my bachelor's is in theater arts. My master's, I did a master's at Rutgers University in English Lit. Then I ended up moving to Canada and spent several years in the PhD program at the University of Toronto. And my thesis subject, my area of specialization was British women authors of the 18th and early 19th century, specifically with a focus on Fanny Burney and also Austen and the other authors writing in the period, like Maria Edgeworth. So I spent several years working on that. Now, that was at a time when university jobs were not easy to come by. So I transitioned away from the university and ended up as a researcher, actually, for Canada's largest trade union. So even though I was no longer studying the Regency period and my beloved English Lit courses, I was still writing and doing research. And then I took early retirement. And when I did that, I decided I needed to do something. And I'd always wanted to write fiction. And at the time, I was a huge lover of historical romance. It was, back in the golden age of historical romance. There's
Yeah.
still a lot of great stuff that's being written, but it was the days of Loretta Chase and Christina Dodd and Julia Quinn and that good stuff. So I started writing. I wrote my first manuscript. It was bought by Kensington Publishing, who is still my publisher and is publishing this book. And so I spent about 13 years writing historical romance and Scottish historical romance set in the Regency era, which was right in my wheelhouse. And it was very exciting to be able to use the work that I did all those years ago to write my novels. And I also did some other writing with my husband. We wrote contemporary romance and romantic suspense together under another pen
Oh, wow.
name. So that was fun because that actually helped me with my mystery chops. I mean, I've always had an element of mystery in all my books. So that really, the ability to learning that part of the craft, writing mystery in a historical setting, was very helpful and in transitioning to this new series. So, and of course, I love Jane Austen. I love Emma, as we all do. And when my editor I offered me the chance to write this series, it was, I mean, really, I felt like it was the culmination of everything I've been working for.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
great.
Do you think your background in academia and your research made it easier to write historical romance, or did you get caught up on you wanted accuracy but you want readability and it was hard to
Yeah,
balance the two for you?
yeah. It is a really hard balance, and it took me a while to figure out um, who my audience was, who I was writing for, and what they wanted. And there are always going to be people who want a high degree of accuracy. But most people really, they don't want not accuracy. They don't want people ringing doorbells or whatever. Um, but they first and foremost come to be entertained, especially with genre fiction. So what I eventually realized was that I really only needed to do as much research as was necessary for the particular book. So
Mm,
I didn't have to know everything about Regency plumbing. I just needed to know enough about Regency plumbing for what I needed in that particular scene. So once I
mm.
figured that out, research did become a lot easier because you can just burn up a lot of writing time doing research, right?
Right, and if you love it, it's fun,
Oh
so it
yeah.
doesn't feel like you're wasting time in
Yeah.
the moment.
Yeah, I can look at pictures of, manor houses and castles and that kind of stuff for days, right? But
Yeah.
job number one is to get the words on the page and to craft an engaging story.
Right, right. So where did Austen fall in all of this? Did you read her when you were younger? Did you find her in high school reading? Like, how did you come into your love for Jane Austen?
Well, I think this is kind of interesting. I think when I was a preteen, I was quite young. My older sister had an English pen pal in the days when people had pen pals.
Yeah.
And her pen pal sent her a whole bunch of Georgette Hare books.
Oh, wow.
And, I kind of, as a kid, grew up reading, standard children's fare, great stuff, Wind in the
Mhm.
Willows, things like that. But when I was about 13 or 14, my sister put these Georgette Hare novels in my hands. And
Mm,
I thought, oh, it was like a whole new world, the Regency era. What is
yeah.
this world, right?
Mm,
And I just was entranced by it. And that did take me eventually to Austen. And of
mm,
course, we read Austen in high school. I think probably just Pride and Prejudice, maybe.
right.
But that was what really gave me my love for the Regency, the Georgian and the Regency eras. So when
Mm,
I went to university, after I had my little theater, as I said, I was a drama arts major for a while. But then when I transitioned to English literature, that was kind of my natural place, I felt, because
mm.
I loved it. I loved the period. I loved the writers. I loved the women writers of the period and Austen, of course.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite Austen novel? I know it's hard to pick, but is there one particular that you could reread over and
Yeah,
over?
it's actually Emma. It is
Is it?
Emma.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was why, again, when my editor said, what about doing a series on Emma as an amateur sleuth after she's married? I was like, oh, this is, the stars are lining up. I also really love Northanger Abbey just
Mm.
because it's so funny. I mean, and she's so sweet, and Henry Tilney is such a great hero. So I would rank them as one and two.
That would be a great cozy mystery.
Yeah,
Shout
yeah.
out to Kensington if they want to
Yes,
continue with the second one.
exactly. Exactly.
We will take that. I was curious if they approached you with the idea for just an Austen inspired or specifically Emma. So you said they did then we're looking
Yes.
for an Emma
Y- Yeah.
Knightley Christie.
Yes. And it was actually, so I'd been publishing historical romance since 2009 and I loved it, but I felt like I'd kind of reached the end of it.
Mm,
And I had been thinking for a couple of years that I wanted to transition to historical mystery or historical fiction. And
yeah.
so when I ended my last contract, I raised that with my agent, and he said, "Let me get back to John, my editor." And John said specifically, "What about uh, an amateur sleuth mystery with Emma as the amateur sleuth shortly after she's married?" So that was actually their specific suggestion, and it was just like I said, it was like boom, the fireworks went off, the light went on, and we just dove right into it, so it was great.
I loved hearing that and that you were so open with it because I think that's the side of the publishing world that maybe not a lot of readers are aware of. Like, oftentimes we think that writers are just sitting there, sipping their tea and looking outside and like, oh, this idea comes to me and I write a whole novel based on the idea.
Right.
But sometimes you are approached with the idea, some
Yeah.
parameters are already set, and they ask if you would like to write that.
Mhm.
And then from that point, then your creativity takes over and you write the
Right.
book.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I mean, the thing is um you're right, people kind of think we're all like this, with our teacups staring out the window musing, right? Which there is a certain amount of that.
right.
But these publishers and these editors are very experienced. And
Mhm.
the only surprising thing to me when he brought it to me is, there are other Austin based mysteries. I mean, Stephanie Baron's great series and Carrie Debris.
Mhm.
But I was astonished actually when he raised it that no one has thought to do a mystery series with Emma because, oh my God, she's the perfect amateur sleuth, right? Like, of all the
Yes,
characters,
yes. She's
she's the
one of the
one,
nosiest
she's the
person ever.
nosiest.
Yeah.
She's the nosiest. She knows her flaws, at least now, toward the end of Emma. She figured them out, but she's the nosiest. She's kind of the most impulsive in a way. And, she's at the top of the food chain, so she can kind of
Yeah.
see a big picture. But the whole nosy thing was like, why did nobody ever think of this before? I'm so grateful they didn't, right?
Right. Absolutely. You get the opportunity to be the
Hmm.
first to do it. Um,
Yes.
and I love that. I'm curious because I am about a quarter of the way in, so that way I wouldn't worry about saying any spoilers today.
Okay.
And I am absolutely loving it. And I have a very definitive picture of the characters based on one of the movie adaptations in my
Yes.
mind when I read it.
Hmm.
I am curious, did you have anyone in mind? Because to me, it very clearly comes through, and maybe I'm projecting that. So, did you have a set couple from the adaptation?
I did actually, and it's the version with Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeremy Northam is the one.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, did you have a different one? Because I do
I
have other characters from a
did.
different one. It's a mashup.
To me, it screamed Johnny Flint and Anna
Oh
Taylor-Joy's version,
yes.
like
Oh yes.
100%
Yeah.
that came
Yeah.
across, but I also love the Gwyneth Paltrow version,
Yeah.
so I can see a mix because I do
Yeah.
think those have a lot of similarities in the way that
Yeah.
they portray it, compared to some of the others, so
Yeah. So with Emma, I think, and I love the Anna Taylor Joy version too. And so with Emma, specifically, I think I channeled the Gwyneth Paltrow version a little more in terms of her character, especially her maturity. Like, she's kind of,
Mm,
I think, a more mature interpretation of Emma, which
yes,
works for the book because Emma
yes,
needs to have learned something by this point.
right.
And of course, I love the 4-part series too with Johnny Lee Miller. I thought he was a great
Yeah.
Knightley. But the character who really changed my mind and inspired me for the book was the Bill Nighy character from Mr.
Mm,
Woodhouse. Because when I
mm,
saw the movie, because we're used to Mr. Woodhouse being kind of old and wearing his shawls,
right.
and the first time I saw Bill Nighy come down those stairs the way he did and just jump, and I thought, this is the most brilliant interpretation of Mr. Woodhouse.
Right,
And so
right.
I really did channel a lot of that, and that kind of just took it as inspiration, right? So you're definitely not wrong. It's there's a bit of a mashup, I think.
So that I love about reading because everyone is gonna have their own idea in
Yeah,
their head of which on-screen actor they're thinking of when they read it, if they've seen any
yeah,
of the adaptations.
yeah.
But it's so much fun because, I mean, I have to say, only being a little bit in, Emma is just perfect for this role,
Oh,
and
great.
it's just
Yeah.
coming together so well, and I can't wait to get to it later today so I can finish up some more, but, um, we did have a question in the Patreon community that was asked, and that was, did you decide on the murder, who was going to be the murderer before you went into the book? So I guess they were kind of maybe wondering, how do you lay out now that you're writing mystery versus your historical romance?
Hmm.
Do you set everything out ahead? Were you a plotter or planner? Did that change when you went
Right,
into this book?
right. It I'm definitely a plotter, and my editor also insists on, like, he usually likes something like a 20-page single space synopsis to approve before I, start.
Yes.
So I do that as much as possible. I try to figure out who the murderer is. I try to figure out the motives, and I really try to figure out um, the sequences and the high and low points in the plot. because I think there are some blessed writers in the world who don't have a lot of anxiety about writing and can just sit down and write. I'm not one of them. Like, writing can be pretty anxiety producing for me. So for me to have a roadmap and a clear sense of where I want to go really helps me to write. And then I love revising, so I go back and revise. But yes, I knew who the murderer was going to be, and I pretty much knew how I was going to get there. So,
think I've already had 10 guesses and
yeah.
I'm like 6 chapters in and I can't make up my mind
Yeah.
already. So
Well, and that actually was for me the biggest difference and challenge in writing historical romance, because even though my historical romances are pretty mystery forward, and
mm,
some of them are very mystery forward,
mm,
um, I had never really had to worry too much about the idea of red herrings and multiple suspects and that sort of
right,
thing. So I really had to pay attention to that, because in a historical romance, depending on what the plot is, it may not be critical that you don't know who the villain is, or you can know who the
right,
villain is, and it doesn't change the trajectory of the story. But it certainly
right.
does in mystery, right? You don't want
Yes.
them guessing it by chapter three.
Right. That would make for a boring
Yeah,
book. We
yeah,
we need to be kept waiting. And so I do believe this is pitched as a series, correct?
yes,
That
it
this is gonna be a
is.
series. Can we get
Yes,
any insider information yet on what's going to be happening, what we should expect? Any
sure,
clues for us?
sure. So I'm almost finished, actually, the second book in the series, which is called Murder at Donwell Abbey. So
We're
we're
getting
going to
nods.
switch it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's going to take place, that comes out in November 2025, I believe. So next year, and that is a winter setting. It's after the holidays, and obviously the murder is going to be at Donwell Abbey. So there's a great deal more action. We're going to see more of Donwell Abbey. We're going to see even more of Mr. Knightley, and we're also going to see John and Isabella, who are going to come into this story for the first
Oh,
time,
wow.
and their
Oh,
children. So that's fun, because I like having kids in stories too. So John and Isabella's oldest son is going to play a role in the book.
love it.
So that was fun. Yep.
Oh, that's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm rolling forward with that, and have ideas for subsequent books. So yes, they're going to be at least three books and hopefully more.
Perfect. I'll be excited to see where Emma's journey takes her, and also as their marriage kind of progresses and they
Yes.
age too, it's going to
Yes.
be exciting to see how their character arc heads
Yeah.
into the series.
Yes, absolutely. I've enjoyed working on that. I haven't written, I've not been able to write a book where the couple is already married and settled to a certain extent, and how that dynamic works. Excuse me. And of course, the fun bit is with Emma and George, is not only is he her husband, he's also the magistrate. So he
Yeah,
is the chief law enforcement officer uh,
yeah.
in the district and in the parish. So that both works for and against Emma, depending on what she is up
Mhm.
to and what she wants to do.
I love it. And this book, A Murder in Highbury, is going to be releasing October 22nd, I
Correct.
believe. Very
Correct.
shortly. It's available for pre-order already. If anybody wants
Hmm.
to make sure they get it right away, grab a copy. And hopefully, if they want to read it quickly, they can read it before we have our next discussion with you,
That'd
and
be awesome.
we can discuss it then. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for taking the time to share about yourself and Murder in Highbury. I know we have a lot of very excited Austen fans that are eager
It's
to get their hands
terrific.
on this one.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for having me on. It's been great.